Hello, everyone. I don't have firecrackers to shoot off, but we know whatever day you're getting this, we are remembering this whole weekend period, the Declaration of Independence, Independence Day, the birth of our country. And certainly we understand that independence from the patriots at that time wanted to be independent from England because England was controlling the colonists here. England was being a dominant influence. The colonists here didn't have any rights themselves. And so we got to get free from all of this in order to truly be independent and not be dependent for everything and everyone on England and what they provide or don't provide for us. So we get that sense of independence. On the other hand, maybe we always have to need to look at, are we called to be independent in our life every day? Well, I think there's a way we are called and there's a way we're not called. I'm going to talk first about the way we're not called. That we're not called to be independent of one another in this country. And what I mean by that is, in fact, sometimes when I preached on this day, I talk about the Declaration of Interdependence. That the sense of independence, which is you go your way, you have your life, I go my way, this is what you believe, that's what I believe, just independent of one another, will only be around the people like us that look at us and think us, that's who we're going to be around. We're going to be independent of anything and anybody else. Obviously, we know our God from the very beginning called us to say, He created man and woman and said, come together. And His notion was that it's not good for any human being to be alone, that we are called to be interdependent and recognize in that good sense our need for one another. In fact, I think there's been a lot of reflections in recent years on how in our independence, too often young people find themselves, they've got friends on Facebook, probably mentioned that before, but isolated, not really in a healthy sense, that how are we interdependent? How do we look out for one another? And so that every young person in their 20s or 30s just has to do it on their own. Another place where this has happened is among a lot of aging people. Too often with aging people, we isolate them, we get rid of them. We don't want them to be dependent on us in any kind of way. And so the other thing you're finding in a lot of older people today, there's a lot of loneliness because they're put aside. And rather than saying, hey, we are interdependent, every age group, every background, every political persuasion, every religion, every personality type, we really are meant to be interdependent there with and for each other and doing what we can and always doing it to seek the good of the other, not just to seek our own good, so that we can be independent and do whatever we want with nobody else's needs depending on us. So a sense of interdependence, yes. Now, here's another perspective. There's a sense in which we are called to be independent. And here I want to go back to, I remember a few years back going to an AA meeting. I'm not an alcoholic, but I've had friends and sometimes they've invited me to their meetings and said, Father, you just want to be there and listen. You'll see that we are a deeply faith-filled group. So I remember this one time among many in which the presenter that day, it was around July 4th, maybe the night before, was saying, we remember the independence of the colonists from England, and that was a step forward for them. Well, he went on to say to this group, we also need to be independent of alcohol, independent of our addictions, independent of worrying about what other people think in an unhealthy way. And it really came across and talking about that and people in small groups were talking, where do we need to be independent of things that are unhealthy and that weigh us down rather than lift us up? And again, alcoholism, but even underneath that, wanting one's own way, worried about this or that, and fear of even the future because you can't control it, so we'll just worry about it and drink to relax. And one of the things that came out in that group too, which I think is good for all of us, is that he was saying that if we're going to be independent of alcohol, then we obviously need to be dependent on something or someone, not just flying high on our own. And so that's where probably so many of you know that Alcoholics Anonymous began talking about in the 12 steps, recognizing there's a higher power. And handing our life over to that higher power to be the most important, positive, healthy, good influence in our lives. It may be for somebody Jesus Christ. It may be some other sense of God. But the point is coming to see I'm not independent in that way, but I am independent of all the things with my higher power, so I just don't let everything in my life suck me in and weigh me down. That can happen not just to alcoholics, for all of us. Here's a good thing to think about. In what way in your life right now, some attitude, some action, some emotion, some of the way you deal with people, how you look at work, how you even look at the whole political realm and all of that. Is there something there that when we look at that we need to become dependent on our higher power to help us not to be such caught up in this or that situation, that we can be independent of what's bad for us, of what's bad for our relationships with one another, of what's bad for our country, independent only in the sense of being dependent on a God who calls us to come together and seek to understand and respect. And even with our differences, never let differences be a cause for hatred, or never go through one's life with resentment just eating us up, or anything else that we can rely too much on, just like the alcoholic does on alcohol. So today, a lot to reflect on. Again, to recognize we are all interdependent. That's a good thing. And we do need to be independent of anything that weighs us down or divides us or keeps us from being open to the higher power that all people speak of, a God, a creator who loves us, who brought us together in our differences, not to beat each other up, not to just be negative because we see things from a different point of view, but rather a higher power who wants to call us to come together, to hear each other's stories, to better understand each other, and especially to overcome the great sin of pride, where I see it the right way and you don't. Hey, we need to come together and hear each other out, and even where there's differences, be independent of getting caught up in hatred or resentment or I'm more important than you. Take a moment and see, where do each of us, even now, is there something in my life I need to be independent of because it's using me in a way that's negative on me and my relationships and those around me. Quiet moment. Where are you called to be independent, and how do you let the higher power help you?